Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of my series building the Chicago Northwestern N-scale Harvard subdivision of the Wisconsin division. If you remember from episode 1, I gave kind of some backstory about how in my alternate history the Chicago Northwestern has lived on into the modern era, and my goal is to do kind of a proto-freelance N-scale layout, kind of showing what that would look like if it was still around in 2021, 22. This episode is going to go in a little more detail on what I have acquired so far in terms of rolling stock and how I plan on utilizing those things. And then also I want to show you some baby steps that I've done to actually get this layout into a reality. So let's start off by kind of showing you what I've managed to acquire so far. Um, one of the big pieces I mentioned last episode in terms of freight traffic on the Harvard subdivision are grain trains. One that will interchange with the Milwaukee, Racine, and Troy, the MERT, and then a couple grain trains that continue north actually on the CNW past Janesville. So I'm trying to get a good number of grain hoppers. I have a fair number of CNW ones. Many of them are part of that set my uncle gave me I mentioned last episode. And with these, I want to modernize them. Get some body mounted couplers. I need to weather them because by 2021 or by 2010, which is roughly when this layout's going to start, these will be pretty aged. And also, I need to get the modern yellow hazard striping on the sides put on them as well. And then I also tried to get a number of additional modern non-Northwestern hoppers just to vary it up, because when I've looked at actual railfan videos of the Harvard sub under UP operation now, that's what I've seen. And I feel like I've got a good start so far. My goal is to have 30 or 40 hoppers so I can build some decent sized trains going up and down the line. And then for the through manifests up to Janesville and back, and then also for the local freights, I've been watching railfan vids of the actual Harvard subdivision, and I've got some box cars and then some smaller hoppers for things like concrete, which get actual traffic on the line. And then I actually managed to get a hold of 3 of the old Concours CNW auto racks for a really amazing price. And so I might just have to imagine that the GM plant up in Janesville is still up and running to kind of explain why there's auto traffic going on. And then I've got a few non-CNW box cars and a gondola as well for the local. I need to get a few more of those, and then I also need to get some tank cars. There's been some tank cars that I've seen spotted on the local runs just to help keep it in line with the prototype operations. So I'm really happy there. I'm also really happy with how many Metro cars and locomotives I've been able to gather. I actually feel like I am set in this part of the layout for a while because I've got enough to run 3 different trains at the same time, each of them with locomotive, 4 coaches, and a cab car, and I think that looks like a really good size and end scale. I actually managed to grab the last couple things I needed for my Metro side of things from kind of an unexpected source. One of the layouts that really I've followed and really kind of inspired what I'm trying to do is Daryl Cruz's UP Geneva subdivision. First from just reading about it, an earlier version of it in Model Railroader several years ago, but then recently I found his YouTube channel and was watching several of his videos there. But if you follow him, you know that he had to move houses, and in doing so he decided to make the switch to HO scale, which is sad news, but it also meant he was selling off his N scale collection, and I managed to get his Metra F40PH and also one of his Metro coach cars as well. You can see in this clip right here the locomotive that I managed to get. So it's kind of cool that part of his layout will live on here in the Harvard subdivision, so that's pretty neat. And then for the MERT, the Milwaukee, Racine, and Troy line, so far I've managed to grab 2 Atlas-8s, one of the old school kind of traditional cabs, and then one of the newer wide cab styles, and they're pretty hard to come by, so I'm really happy I managed to grab them. I'm hoping to get one more MR&T locomotive, and if I can't find one, I might have to do a custom paint locomotive to round the fleet off. For the Chicago Northwestern, I feel I'm also off to a really good start. I've got an Atlas SD60, and all of these that I'm about to show you, all these locomotives have DCC decoders, and I've tested them too, by the way. So I've got an Atlas SD60, I've got a Scale Trains Dash 9, and then two Dash 9s from Kato, along with an AC 4400 from them as well. Now, one thing about the Scale Trains model, it's gorgeous, especially for the price point, but one thing really let me down in that their Dash 9s have the high number boards, which the CNW did not have any Dash 9s with high number boards. And, the website, the pic makes it seem like the actual locomotive had the high boards, which, it doesn't. Here's an actual picture. And it's the one downside of the operator series they do. They don't do road specific details. They just have one version of the locomotive they run, but they never did a rivet counter version of the CNW-9. So it's a bit of a bummer, but I'll work with it. Eventually, I'm going to have to get. I figure on a line like the Harvard sub where you have very low freight traffic, the CNW would relegate its older Dash 9s to that line. So in 2010. In 2010, 2011, it makes sense that you'd still see a number of those early 90s locomotives, but I do eventually want to get one or two, SD70s in the tier 3 or tier 4, or one of the modern GEVOs in the higher tiers, which again I'll have to do, a custom paint job on, since the Northwestern didn't exist at that point. But that's the only other piece I feel I need at this point to round off my Northwestern locomotives. So one thing you don't see here are my passenger project cars and engines. I mentioned that at the very end of episode 1. So since I'm going down the alternate history path, I decided to really kind of lean into that and use that as an excuse to really dig into the thing I enjoy the most about trains and model railroading, which is passenger rail. And so I'm imagining that the Chicago Northwestern is going to try and revitalize intercity service in the 2010s. I'm not going to imagine they continued it. I'm going to still think that it died off in the 70s, that Amtrak showed up and everything, but that in the 2010s CNW is going to try and bring it back, kind of following the model Brightline is currently doing down in Florida, right? Brightline is the first private passenger rail that we've seen in the U.S. in decades. So follow their playbook of take a private line with little rail freight traffic and then use that as the basis for a passenger route. So what I'm imagining is that the Northwestern would have used ARRA, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and form kind of a public-private partnership. So they would get public dollars to help subsidize the line, mainly the cost of laying higher speed rail, but then the CNW would maintain control. And I figured an ideal target for private higher speed service would be from Chicago to Twin Cities for two main reasons. First, it's a sweet spot distance for higher speed rail. Too much farther, and a plane's a no-brainer. There's no way even Japanese high-speed rail type speeds would make it worth it. Flying is going to get you there faster at a lower price point. Closer, you're not going to see much of a benefit. But if the trip from Chicago to Minneapolis takes 4.5 hours, which is fairly reasonable, you're talking an average speed of around 100 miles per hour, that's way faster than a car. And if you factor in the time you have to spend at the airport before your flight, you're only looking at about an hour longer to take the train for what would be cheaper and way less stress than dealing with just all the airport hoopla you have to deal with. So that's one reason. And then second, just from a nostalgia standpoint, the original CNW Streamliner, the 400, ran from Chicago to Twin Cities. And if you're not that familiar with this CNW, it's called the 400 because it was 400 miles in 400 minutes. That was their motto. So it seems only right that the Northwestern would kick off their return to intercity private rail by bringing back a Chicago to Twin Cities route. So I'm having it go up through the Harvard sub rather than the original 400 route through Milwaukee, because I'm imagining that Congress wouldn't be too keen to subsidize a private line that would directly compete with an Amtrak service. No one's taking the Empire Builder to Minneapolis for speed, but they are taking the Hiawatha service from Chicago to Milwaukee. And so they wouldn't want the CNW to run up that route because it would compete with Hiawatha service. So they're going to go through here, and the Northwestern would like this anyway. This route's better equipped to handle higher speed passenger rail with Metra for reasons I'll get to in a minute. So anyway, so that's my backstory, and I don't have anything to really show right now because my first wave of stuff is off getting painted. I've used a great Goer's custom N scale is awesome, and so what I've done is so my thinking was that the CNW, which the joke is that it stands for cheap and nothing wasted, they would not roll out a flashy new train set for this service, not at the start, which they didn't even do that for the original 400, right? They would want to pilot the service using easily accessible, tried and true equipment, especially because the vast majority of the money they'd have to dump into this would be laying the high speed rail. So, what I would imagine is in the first 10 years or so, they're going to use P42s and Amfleets and Horizon cars, which are already seeing higher speed service on the route from Chicago to Detroit. So now I already got my P42 painted. Here's a picture of that. But the reason I can't show you more of that is because I sent it back. So I got the P42 painted, got it back, made sure it looked good in person. It did. And then I recently sent my Amfleet cars to get painted in a CNW scheme. And I sent the P42 with them just to help with color matching. So they're off getting painted right now. Now, one thing I've learned in this process is that a lot of model railroad companies, maybe with the exception of like Kato, for the most part, make very limited production runs for a lot of their stuff. And so if you don't get in on the pre-orders, you have a strong chance of missing the stuff that you want. So, but I'm really glad I jumped on the pre-order for Rapido's gorgeous new Horizon cars that just came out. I ordered 3 undecorated ones, 2 coach cars, and then like a cafe car. And they'll make up part of, I want 2 consists, right? I want to be able to run 2 400s at the same time. So this will be part of the second consist. I have another Amfleet coach because I feel like 4 coaches is a decent size. And I'm going to get those, painted up in the second wave. So I'm excited I've got those, and I'm excited to add to it. So with that, let's look at my expanded track plan here. My goal is to fully scenic 4 of these 4-foot sections, these 4-foot dominoes. And now that you know that the plan is to have high-speed passenger rail, that's why you can see these 4 tracks coming into Harvard, and I feel like after Harvard they can go down to 2 because they're not competing with local traffic really anymore. And similar to the Northeast Corridor, the idea would be that commuter, the metro commuter trains, and then local freight would use those perimeter tracks, those 2 tracks on the edge, and then any through freights and the high-speed 400s would use the 2 interior tracks to bypass all that local traffic. So my goal with these 4 scenic ones, I do want to have scenery that provides somewhat of a natural cutoff of your view on either end. So on the north side over here, in the actual town of Harvard, there's a couple warehouse facilities, and with that S-curve that serves as kind of a natural cutting off of the viewpoint. And then over here on the south side of it, there's an actual overpass, and I'll use that as kind of the view cutoff as it curves around as well. And I really wish I had more progress to show you on the actual layout, but it's been really slow getting the track and some of the other materials that I need. I want more flex track for microengineering, but that's on back order. And then my first set of switches literally just came in this past week. The Code 55 Atlas number 10s that I need for the mainline tracks, but my switches that I plan on using for switching into the yard, the number 5s are either on back order or they're unavailable still. And so that's why I don't have more. But there's still work that I'm doing to make sure everything is appropriately sized. Are my siding tracks long enough for the trains I want to run, that kind of stuff. I printed off the track plan from AnyRail for this core domino here at 1:1 scale, and laid it out over the foam for the first 4x2 module. AnyRail's print function is really slick for this. It has like a grid assignment for each page you print, and then has little alignment logos in the corners to help you out as well. So it looks really slick here. And so, like I said, I got my number 10 switches that will run across the main line. They came in, so I laid those out to make sure, is this going to work? Because if you look, those number 10s literally run it takes the full 4 feet to go from the outbound local track all the way to the inbound local track over those 4 tracks. And so, and I want to use those longer number 10 switches because you're going to be having those long metro cars go over those, and I feel like it's going to make for smoother operation. Now, the main thing I wanted to see is if, with these printouts, is if the sidings were long enough to store trains. I've measured it, I've done calculations, but I'm a very visual person. So you can see here I laid out a consist of, a loco and then 5 coach cars, and they add up quickly. I think the length looks great in N scale, and you can see that the Metro track, holding track number 2, which is entirely on this section, this 4x2 section, is perfectly, the length is perfect. It looks awesome. I did run into one problem with the siding up at the top there. You can see that it's not quite long enough for the length of metro trains I want to run, so either I'll need to extend that or only use that for smaller consists, basically, is what I've learned. But that's all for now. You saw in one of those quick clips that my cork roadbed sheets also arrived, so I'm going to start laying that down, start laying down my number 10s, start doing the wiring. I'll need to figure out how to wire across so many switches. My plan was, to wire on either end of the 4 mainline tracks, but I'm worried about the connections between the switches, that they'll be unpowered if I do that. So my goal for the next video is to have some track down and wired, and although there obviously isn't a lot of room yet for operation on just one 4x2 section, I want to at least have a video of engines and trains running across it just to show you that update. Because once my goal is to just get track down on multiple dominoes here, at least the core 2, so this one and then the other one that has the rest of the yard and the Milwaukee, Racine, and Troy interchange tracks. So that's my short-term plan here. But that's it. Thanks so much for following along as this layout slowly becomes a reality. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you want to see another fun project that I'm doing to help kill time that's Northwestern related, I'm doing a Chicago Northwestern themed playthrough of a computer game called Transport Fever 2. I started in the year 1930, and right now I'm in the year 1976, so go check it out and see what that's all about if you want to see more Northwestern related content. But thanks again, and we'll see you next time.